Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And joining me to talk Astros opening day and preview the season is our old friend, Astros Future Co-Host, Kenny Van Doren. Always a pleasure, Kenny, and not a bad way to start the season. This had all the dramatics and all the fun stuff.
Yeah, not at all. I think a lot of people could attest to it, and I saw it on social media too, that no matter who's at the end of that bullpen for the Astros, especially just in a game like that with a 3-run lead most of the second half of that game, you're still on the edge of your seat. I mean, no matter who's pitching, you have an all-star and Josh Hader, very underrated arm, and Brian Abreu, both struggling at the end, but coming away with a win against a team that's spending over $1 billion at times is probably a good way to start the 2025 season.
We're going to get into big picture stuff just in a second, but we saw this infield defense that the Astros really emphasized this offseason. Paredes, Walker, Pena, and Yanner all with outstanding defensive plays. What did you think, though, of Cam and Altuve's early test in the field?
Yeah, I think there's probably still some work to be done there with Altuve in left field. I know a lot of people saw it almost running into Jake Myers, kind of calling off Jeremy Pena at the same time. Sometimes there's two guys that are two positions that the left fielder just listens to, and that'll come with time. But I think you saw a better performance than you did in spring training of Jose Altuve, and he's someone that's going to have fun no matter what. They said that on the broadcast too. So it definitely is, looks like he's having a better feel for reading fly balls, and I don't think his arm was really tested in this game at all, but surely it will be on throws to home moving forward. But I know there was kind of a small hiccup there in right field on a throw from Cam Smith. But other than that, I think he read a ball really well on a dot or a cutting single to right field, I believe from Pete Alonso. Not really diving after that one. I know he has the athleticism to probably make an attempt on that ball, but I think it was a smart play not to. And I believe Framber Valdez got his first double play soon after that play. So definitely setting it up pretty well for the Astros, just defensively. A nice start for both those guys playing new positions.
The one that Cam dove for was like a 69% catch percentage, something like that. So I don't know if he just that means he misread it. Like, what did you see there?
Yeah, I think so. It's a new position. I mean, you can't really knock on the guy too much. I know he got to play a little bit of it in spring training, especially near the end, playing that outfield corner. But it's still it kind of shows you and into late into that game too, with Chas McCormick taking over in right field, that there's still going to be defensive replacements. They're still kind of easing him into that outfield position. They still want him in the lineup for his bat. I mean, first pitch swinging in your major league debut and getting a hit on the first major league pitch you see is a good sign, and good sign for that approach that they have. But also something, I'll spin off of that just with what the Astros are doing. Heard it a lot on the broadcast today with this team taking more pitches. And you saw Isaac Paredes do it a lot. I think the number was like over 1,000 less seen pitches compared to the past two seasons for the Astros. So something about better approach, but still, Cam Smith coming out with that one. But, defensively too, just with him, it is easing him into it. I think what makes him play well as a right fielder is that arm. I think his arm is his best tool by, whoever you're looking at, MLB.com, Pipeline, Baseball America, no matter where you're getting your information, his arm is one of his best tools. And you really get to see it on display too much in this game, but it is going to be a tool to kind of highlight moving forward as he adjusts to the outfield.
Yeah, just when the fan base felt like it was getting a little bit complacent, maybe they were getting upset. Oh, we lost another guy this offseason. He's electrified this fan base. And what a storyline. I mean, 9 months from playing college baseball, 3 months after he's traded for Kyle Tucker. And who could have guessed Kenny Cam would actually replace Tuck and Wright just 3 months after the trade? It's weird.
Yeah, it seemed like all the conversations were just Cam Smith taking over for Bregman. It felt like that was the answer. If Alex Bregman isn't going to re-sign with the Astros, then Cam Smith was going to go to that spot. But in that same trade, you get Isaac Paredes, who was going to play third base or even second, depending if they were going to get Nolan Arenado or bring Bregman back. There was just so many moving parts on what they were going to do. And who would have thought that he would make the Major League roster right out of the gates? I know he hit like 6 home runs in 6 straight games. I think he played 2 games above high A in the Cubs system, 30 plus pro games. It seemed like a long shot to give him that opportunity. And one of the biggest things Dana Brown has said the last couple of years, you look back at Jacob Melton in one of his first spring trainings. You look at even Drew Gilbert, who they traded to the Mets for Justin Verlander. He wanted these guys to fight for roster spots. He wanted them to be aggressive early on. And they weren't more aggressive with anyone in the last couple of years under Dana Brown than they were with Cam Smith. I think that is something that should be noted. There was a lot of trust in him. Everyone's talking about the size and what he brings, but he seems like a very smart baseball player too. He had kind of a ground ball issue when he was in college with Florida State. When I say issue, maybe a little bit higher ground ball percentage than he should have with that power, but you saw it really on display of him carrying the ball a little bit more and getting underneath it in spring training, and that's what they wanted to see carried into his major league debut.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm typically more zoned in on Astros at bats than I am with them in the field, but this has become the most exciting thing to watch in Astros telecast, a fly ball to the outfield. And I really don't think we've seen this, Kenny, since Biggio and Berkman were running towards Towels Hill. I don't even know if you remember all of this, but it used to be like, oh my God, Biggio and Berkman, they're running towards Towels Hill. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, I don't remember too much. I think more of my time was Michael Bourne just with the Hill. I think I was in high school when the Hill got taken down. I guess I was right before the 2017 season. But yeah, it is definitely like a weird thing to see. Just even looking at the lineup. I mean, if I showed you this lineup, Rob, like this time last year, you'd be saying, like, who are these people? You'd have no idea. Why is there a Walker at first base? I mean, he's in Double-A right now for the Astros kind of thing. And it seems like the Astros took an approach to, and Dana Brown talked about this, they wanted an approach where they kind of looked at it defensively, but also looked at just swing decision wise. They wanted guys to get deep into counts. They want to take these starters out of the game early, even if they're not scoring a lot, and just a lot of adjustments, just not just with, who's just going to be playing defensively, but just offensively all at the same time. It really meshed well. And I think the Astros did a good job with that. I think even at parts this offseason, I was starting to think maybe this team wins more games than last year. This last year's team had Alex Bregman. It had Kyle Tucker. At times Alex Bregman, starts off slow, but Kyle Tucker missed some games. The Astros didn't really play up to par of what they thought to. It was a very different team this year. It's a new identity in the same sense, but it's still a team that's striving to win the AL West.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans also might be wondering, why don't you just put Altuve back at second base? Dezenzo looked great. You got Cam playing right field. Now you have outfielders that you're a little bit more excited about. So I looked up the average number of plays a major league player has to make at different positions. And I don't know if you've checked into this, Kenny, but the average second baseman, according to what I looked up, it was about 20 to 25 plays. The left fielder only makes about 3 or 4. The right fielder makes 8 to 10. So Cam's going to be involved in twice as many plays as Altuve, which is interesting. And Jose probably is involved in 1/6 as many plays as he would be at second base.
That's a good thing to note. I never really looked into that as well. And when you have a guy like Jake Myers in center field too, I think that does help Altuve a lot, just with that range into that kind of deep corner out there in left center. And I think one of the pluses of playing at Minute Maid Park is not a lot of ground in left field. Of course, the throw is still going to be, the big question for Jose Altuve moving forward on how much of, maybe a liability his arm is at all, just in left field with plays at the plate. But, defensively, it's, his defense did regress a lot. I think MLB Network did a really good segment on that with Brian Kenny, really jumping into those numbers, the outs above average, the DRS, the defensive run save for those who don't know, and really looking at just that regression. And same with Yordan Alvarez in left field. And, kind of keeping his bat in the lineup because you're still kind of expecting a 300 hitter with an 800 plus OPS, 25 plus home runs a year, maybe from Jose Altuve the next couple of years. You don't want him to be a risk defensively. You don't want him to be losing runs at the same time while he's in the field. So yeah, I mean, lowering that risk of, defensive plays and, not knocking on him too much for that, but it is a good strategy. And I think the Astros kind of took the right approach, and, there's still going to be hiccups. I mean, you're not going to go the whole season without an error from Jose Altuve in left field or one from Cam Smith in right field. You're going to have a couple, especially early on in the stretch, most likely. And it's just going to come with time getting these guys up to speed with the new positions. But at the same time, I think you saw a really good defensive game from Paredes at third base. As you mentioned, him and Yainer Diaz kind of had a good play there halfway through the game. I forget the inning. And, Christian Walker, I Believe, has won a Gold Glove before. So he's played that defense. And there's not much stock or value in the Gold Gloves as much as there used to be, but still rated defensively well at first base.
Yeah, Walker, I think, has got up to 3 Gold Gloves now. And, they talked about in the telecast all the Gold Gloves with the Astros. You got one with Brendan Rodgers. You got one with Pena. And, of course, Dubon, if he plays second base, has one himself. So, and Paredes, we talked about it. He looked great. If anybody, by the way, wants to fact check me on those plays per position, you're welcome to it. I don't know, where exactly you get that stuff, but I tried to figure it out based on some just Googling and stuff like that. In just a second, we're going to get into more Astros storylines, but before we roll on, I just can't wait to see the Cougs in the Sweet 16 Friday night. And of course, every March Madness game's a shot to make a little extra cash. My bookies Bet and Get is back to sweeten the deal. Place a bet on March Madness and get a surprise reward. Hey, free bets, cash back, bonus chips. You never know what's coming next. Maybe it's a number one seed rolling or an underdog shocking the world. Not many underdogs left, but there's some good bets out there for those teams, and smart bettors know the real money is made one game at a time. You can sign up right now. I'll put the promo code in the description. It's MM50, MM50. You can boost your payroll with a deposit bonus designed to help make the most of your money. If you don't want a bonus, that's okay too. Just make sure you let them know we sent you. Bet on every game, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. All right, Kenny, I was trying to think of how Espada gets Zach Dezenzo at bats, because he's talked about wanting young guys not just sitting around. How does he do it? Is it maybe once a week at first, once at left, once in right, and some pinch hits here and there? How do you think they do that?
It is a tough one because you're looking at it like, how are you going to get Altuve, Jordan, and Dezenzo? It feels like, in my mind, those are the three that you're worried about. How can you get all three of them in the lineup at the same time? Because you talk about it, if they put him in left field, does that mean Altuve sits that day? Because if he's DHing, Jordan's out of the game. Jordan's kind of limited to only left field games at Minute Maid Park and DH spots. That's just kind of how it seems. So it kind of comes down to that. How many games Joe Espada has said before, they expect Altuve to play the load of his games, the lion's share, just in left field, and that's where he's going to be. But is there opportunities to put Dezenzo out in left, move Altuve back to second, and Jordan DH? Probably in a world there is. I don't necessarily know if that's really in the works or in the plans. I think, Christian Walker, say he was full go coming back, which I Bleav is an oblique injury. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but that's what he's kind of coming back from. And just in that case, I think you start to see a little bit more starts from Dezenzo at first base. Position-wise, he was a shortstop at Ohio State. Really never stuck at that position. It actually was kind of funny when he came up with the Astros. He was listed as an outfielder, never played the position until he got into the major leagues, and they wanted to add that position to what he could do. So I don't really think third base is really much of an option. He still kind of has an arm, but the mobility isn't really there just to play the position. So I think really you're looking at maybe starts at first base. Makes the most sense. But in a world where you want him, Jordan, and Altuve having at bats, you have to move Altuve probably back to second base and give Jordan the DH spot. But I think most of the time it's going to be kind of a revolving door at some of these positions. Where is he going to step in on those off days? And I think he might be the first guy that you look at, when you need Altuve to sit a day and you want to put him in left field, or because in reality, I think you're maybe expecting him to be a better hitter than Chas McCormick. Just defensively wise, you probably don't want to make him as a defensive substitution in left field or at first base over Christian Walker. So I think some of those starts will come with off days, especially early on in the season, as some guys are getting their legs underneath them. And I probably first base probably makes the most sense, just with kind of Christian Walker easing back into it. And maybe Walker gets DH spots as well if Jordan gets the day off.
Yeah, I hate doing this to Jake Meyers, but especially after he got a couple of hits. But I would think that if you're going to pinch hit late in games, Meyers and the second baseman, whoever it is on that given day, whether it's Rogers or Dubon, and that leaves the other guy available to jump in there, and Chas McCormick can back up in center. Or if Rogers is not the guy that you're pinch hitting for, Dubon is the replacement in center field. So maybe that's how they use Dezenzo. I just trying to think of how they might do it, but I don't know how you feel about it, Kenny, but I just feel like every at bat matters in the majors. And I don't like just having a guy up in the majors because you want to wait for this other guy to have this perfect situation to step in. I mean, if you've got a really good franchise that, finds position players, it might not be there that season. You're waiting for an injury or something like that, but you bring the guy up and the other guy comes back and potentially, and then you just got to send it back down again. So, I like seeing guys up and get the feel of what it is to have a major league at bat.
Yeah, a lot of the shuffling back and forth. I was just thinking about that when I was looking at the roster. When you get sent down, you have to be down for a minimum amount of days, and that really kind of just throws a wrench into some of these guys possibly coming back up to the majors. And the big conversation and question late in spring training was, will Cam Smith and Zach Dezenzo be on the same roster? Does that make sense? At the same time, they're big right-handed power bats, kind of play some different positions, with Cam looking more as like third base and right field, and Zach doing the opposite of looking like a first baseman or a left fielder. You start to question, like, who's going to make this roster, who's going to take those at bats. But when you have a guy up like Dezenzo, it's something, you want to get that power into the lineup. And I think one of the biggest things is you look at those positions where it calls for a power bat. If Christian Walker gets that day off, I don't think you're going to start Mauricio Dubon at first base anymore. That was a thing where they kind of tried to get him into the lineup a couple of times last year, and you need a power bat at that position, especially, the last couple of years. Jose Abreu and John Singleton, not a lot of consistency at this position after Yuli Gurriel's 2021 campaign. He had a dip in 2022. So it is something where you want to keep him just consistently kind of revolving in there. And I don't know what the minimum is, on games they want to play this year, but, with someone like that kind of power, and you want to see it consistently and get him up to speed in the majors and not really be deep on that bench or set down to the minors, I think you want to see him like 80 plus games. And if that's, late at bats or starts or, kind of filling in for guys at multiple positions, I think that's probably the course of action to get to Zach's power in there and get him up to speed.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to see him playing much first base, because I don't want that oblique stuff coming back for Christian Walker. I mean, he was just lacing the ball, even though he didn't have as much to show for it in his first game, but you just love what you see from him. And obviously the defense is just on another level. And another storyline during the spring, there were tons of bullpen openings. The Astros chose Luis Contreras, Steven Okert, Ryan Gusto, and Rafael Montero. All of them except Montero, big spring numbers. They looked really good. Montero's whip was 1.5. Did you like the bullpen decisions, Kenny?
It's one of those things where, the arms aren't fully healthy. I don't think all the options were there, but this bullpen is a shell of what it once was. It was one of the best bullpens probably constructed in baseball history in 2022 with James Click at the helm. But this year it just looks, nothing like it did last year. And last year's bullpen wasn't even that strong of a unit. I think things will change once guys come back healthy and things shift. And there's going to be a lot of starting options, up for grabs and some battles there. But I really thought Logan Van Wy might have gotten squeezed a little bit. Maybe there's still something they want to see from him. But, he's done nothing but compete, nothing but stay healthy. And one of the best abilities is availability. And the guy's never been on the injured list in his life. So, I thought Logan was probably going to crack it there. But, Rafael Montero, they kept him around after DFAing him last year, sent him down to Sugar Land and tried to work with him to bring him back. I still think there's a lot of fringe guys in this bullpen, but one of the biggest things is seeing, how Forrest Whitley might play into this. You look at the 40-man roster with the relievers on the IL, Sean Dubin, who I know missed a good amount of spring training, and Caleb Ort and Forrest Whitley, who aren't expected to be on the injured list for too long. I think those guys will step into this bullpen. And I think it will look a lot stronger than it does just name-wise. It is very hard to nitpick spring training numbers and, especially early, and then kind of see what they're going to do early on in the year. I mean, right now, Hader didn't have the best outing. Abreu struggled at times too. So I think once you get guys like Ort and Whitley into there, I think it does look a little bit stronger. But I still think by the end of the year, the bullpen is going to look different. I think they're going to have to make some additions just to kind of ease what is going to look like on that back end.
Yeah, you sort of spoke to what I think they might have been thinking in this situation with Whitley and Ort potentially coming back pretty soon. Maybe they're just saving options for Van Wy because he was not going to be playing above those two guys. Montero, I would assume that might be where the rubber hits the road with him potentially. I mean, him and Gusto would be the two odd guys out, wouldn't you think, in that situation? Or do you think Okert is a danger of being sent down when those two guys get back?
I think when the two guys get back, the first couple names just come to me. I think Luis Contreras is probably in that conversation. He only used 1 year of options last year when he made his major league debut, and he's a righty. Whitley has to come back or he's getting DFA'd. Like, that's one of the things. Like, he has to make the roster, and I believe Ort does too. I don't have his fan graphs pulled up in front of me if he still has options left, but the expectation is that both those guys would be in the major league bullpen. But in my mind, I think it is just Gusto and Contreras. With Gusto, I think you want to keep him stretched out. You have him up right now. Some guys might not be going super deep, and I say that after Framber Valdez pitches into the 7th inning today, but he's a starter. I mean, that's the thing about Gusto. He's a very effective starter. He was one of the best pitchers in the PCL last year. So you want to get him back stretched out, keep him in the minors, and you just have him around really just for those opportunities in case they need someone to go long or, pick up and, just eat a bunch of innings, because he is pretty much an innings eater. He pitched pretty deep into some outings last year. But that does make, the most sense for Logan when they look at roster construction, bring him on the 40-man roster, whose spot is he going to take kind of thing, who can go to the 60-day, who's on that fringe spot that they could DFA, but why would you do that if you're just going to send it back down or if you really need that arm? So I definitely think that that's probably the case.
Can you tell a little of the Ryan Gusto story? Wasn't he a junior college walk-on to start with?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I mean, it even goes back to high school, like his high school coach, like one of his high school coaches. I think he might have switched high schools, cut him, said there was really nothing there. He was kind of, sending feels out to people. He wanted just an opportunity to pitch in college baseball, anywhere. And, he kind of sent some feelers out, finally found a spot, walked on in a JUCO, followed the JUCO coach to the next spot. And I think he had an opportunity to go to Western Kentucky before the Astros drafted him in 2019. And I think they had to go over slot to pull him away from college. And that would have been his first time in Division I. But, he pitched to those two JUCOs, got that opportunity. He had Tommy John. He lost a season in 2020, really never got his feet under him until I think maybe the 2023 season is when it all started to click. He was in Asheville. The numbers didn't look good. I talked to Sean Buchanan, who's been just climbing the system as well. I think he's the AAA pitching coach now, and just saying like, don't look at the numbers in Asheville. Like it's so like, under the surface that you just don't really know exactly what's happening, what these guys are working on. Gusto is so methodical about everything he's doing, and he climbed the system, got up to AA, and really made a name for himself in that late in that 2023 season with the hooks. And I think he did win a pitcher of the week in the Texas League. It was a good competition just between a lot of those arms. Blair Henley, who got released during spring training, made his major league debut last year. He was a part of that too. Kind of those battles for in those starts to just better each other, and got up to AAA last year and was just a monster. Gusto, I think if you erase the first two AAA starts, he was the best pitcher in the PCL, just numbers wise, strikeouts, most efficient, everything clicked for the guy. And he's very humble about it all, but he also if someone's going to tell him he can't do something, he's pretty much going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, I hope we don't see him anytime soon because the starters are just rolling, but definitely we'll look out to see what he's going to do. I don't typically take much stock in spring numbers, but Ronel Blanco got torched in spring training. You worried about him at all?
Last time we talked about Ronel Blanco, Rob, I made like the worst take in the world. I never really thought he would be able to stretch out, be a starter. I didn't really know what to believe, and then he threw a no-hitter, and I think he brought me on the podcast right after. So I don't really know what to say about that. You don't want to take too much value in it, but when a guy is getting beat up like that in spring training, it is something kind of raises an eyebrow. How are things going to kind of go from there? I've been just pulling up his spring numbers now: 15 and 2/3 innings in 2024, 14 innings the year before that in 2023, and the guy gave up one combined run, and then this time around he gave up 10 earned runs. You never really know exactly what everyone's working on, but I think it's behind you. You flush all those starts, and I don't think there's any injury concern. There was no word about that in spring training, but maybe there was some tweaks to the arsenal that they were making. I didn't read anything about that, but that's always what people say is maybe they're working on something, but you're not trying to take too much stock into it. But I'm not really worried. I think if you get through April, that ERA is hovering around a 6, and it really isn't falling down after each start and kind of progressing to the mean, then I don't really know what to make of it. But right now, I wouldn't be worried.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you have this skepticism because he wasn't supposed to be anything. It's his first year, well, did it all happen? Was this an accident? I think there is that skepticism because he's a weird case. And also the second year major league pitcher that hasn't pitched a ton of innings, like a lot of these guys that, you get to the major leagues and you haven't had a workload like you have in the minor leagues. I mean, I guess that's why there is that. Well, I don't know. Maybe that is something to worry about. I don't know.
Yeah, he's never pitched over 100 innings in back-to-back seasons. That's like the question. Can he do it? He pitched a career high 167 innings last year. Before that, in the major leagues, he made 17 appearances in 2023 in only total 52. That's like kind of where he kind of maxed out. That is a good thing to think about. How would that work? Another thing that just came to my mind, I was watching the game too. I don't know if you saw this, but Julie Morales always takes her photo of the pitchers there, and it's going to change every year, and you don't ever Keedy in that mix anymore. But who would have thought, Ronel Blanco would still be, a part of those starters and be one of the best starters just in the Astros rotation. He probably had a right to be an all-star last year, and people didn't really know his name until he pitched that no-hitter. And I've known about him for a couple of years, just watching the Sugarland games being down there. But I mean, who would have thought that?
Incredible story. I hope it continues that way. And what do you guys think out there? What do you listeners think? I want your Astros takes. Put it in the YouTube comments, and don't forget to support us by subscribing on YouTube, giving us a thumbs up, and listen on the go with your favorite podcast app. All right, Kenny, will the Astros win the West again? That's the big question. And who is their biggest threat out West?
Yeah, well, the Astros are on pace to win 162 games right now, so I think they're in good shape. I did a poll recently, and I did not have the Astros making the playoffs. It was just one of those things where I think there's a lot of moving parts in the American League. It is up for grabs, at all. I would change my picks today just based on some of these performances I see, and that's just recency bias. But I am a little bit worried about the depth of the Astros. Even with starting pitchers coming back, there's a second opinion going out there about. Or the Astros are seeking one with Luis Garcia. Is he going to make it back this season? JP France went on the 60-day IL. I mean, do you have the starting pitching depth if someone gets hurt? That's one of my questions. And I think at times this bench could be, a head scratcher. Still a lot of questions coming in about, defense. And we talked about that at length. But I think, this team has an easy path to win the American League West. I think the Rangers do. I don't really believe too much in the Angels. Maybe if this was 2019, I would be all over this Angels team with the names on it. But in my opinion, I've seen people talk about it. I don't think this is too much of a hot take. I think I almost said Oakland. I think the Athletics. I think there is an opportunity for the A's to make some noise, win some games this year. They finally spent money once they moved, and they have guys coming up in the system that are good. They have Max Muncy. They have Jacob Wilson, some really talented infielders and nice hit tools on both those guys. Jacob Wilson with the higher hit tool, of course. But I do like the A's. I think this is like one of those maybe A's teams. I don't know if the last couple of years it may be comparable to some of these Angels teams are like, they might be sneaky good, and then they end up not being. Maybe their manager gets a mohawk and then gets fired the next day. So talk about Matt in there with that. But I think this team does win the West, but I think the the A's might be the biggest competitor.
Not the Rangers, because a lot of people have talked about the Rangers. And Bruce Bochy is one of those every other year managers.
Yeah.
At least he was with the Giants.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest one to say. I want to be different here. I want to believe that the Athletics have turned a page just offensively. I was still kind of a head scratcher a little bit about the Rangers. Once healthy, that is one of the best rotations in baseball, hands down. Kumar Rocker being in there as well at the back of it is pretty talented. It's a pretty talented group. Offensively, I think there's a lot of moving parts with that team. They're going to be healthy this year, but you think, look at it, who's going to take a step forward. I don't know. Wyatt Langford is a Prince at Promise kind of thing, and coming over quick riser, just like Cam Smith getting to the major leagues. Is that offense all going to come together and click for him? At the same time, is Seager going to come back and be like MVP caliber player, play the whole season? Well, that's to be determined. And I think you can always kind of count on some of those other guys. Marcus Semien too, being that Mr. Consistency, I believe is what they call him. So I still think that team, will be fighting. I think it's a postseason team, but in my opinion, I do think the Athletics are a team not to be overlooked.
Yeah, it's funny. We had in the NFL the first name team, the Washington NFL team for a while. Now we have the last name team in baseball, the Athletics with no first name. And I don't know, are they going to light the beam in Sacramento if they win games? I don't know how they're going to do that out there. It's funny to, think about it. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. There is a team in Sacramento right now.
Yeah, I know it's going to be kind of a weird thing the next couple of years. The ATH instead of the OAK on those score bugs too will just be a different thing to see. I haven't watched a game there since probably September of last year, and that was primarily just watching the River Cats. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see how it works and how it plays out. But I think it'll be a couple more years before they're in Vegas, and the AL West will be kind of back to a normal kind of look.
You follow the minors so much. I don't know do you know much about that Sacramento ballpark and, what it looks like, or, if it's hard to hit in there, or because I know it's going to be not the same as far as foul territory. Like that A's ballpark was like a foul ball pop-up was an out.
Yeah, Sutter is Sutter Park. And, I watched a good amount. I remember watching a good amount of Giants games near the end of the season. And especially during the summer, I think Kevin Biggio was in the Giants system. So I watched a couple of those games. He went to a fine high school that was as well. But they had to make some remodeling stuff to this, kind of get it up to major league par. But of course, it is a beautiful park, a lot of greenery, a lot of berm just in the outfield. So that'll be a different look. Kind of looks like the Angels, just a tiny bit, in my opinion, just with a little bit of the grass look to it. But there is a lot of grass, a lot of hills. You are on a little bit of an elevated plane, so the ball will fly in that place too. But it's just a kind of regular minor league park. It looks like it. When you think about like a basic minor league park just for AAA, that's exactly what it looks like in my mind.
Was there any other Astros angles when you were watching spring training you think might have slipped by some people, or stuff that caught your interest that maybe wasn't a mainstream storyline? Cam Smith. It wasn't Cam Smith, I guess. That's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think this is still a conversation. It's been a conversation for years, and I think it was kind of overlooked just with a lot of the moving parts on the bench and Cam Smith kind of taking it. I mean, who's the second left-handed bat? That's the thing that's just in my mind. Like, who is going to be that? Caratini can switch it, yes, but you really don't have another left-handed power option. I don't really know if Jacob Melton will play up to that. Right now, last year, it seemed like the power really diminished. I know he had the wrist injury, didn't really get to get settled in AA before they shuttled him off to AAA. But who's going to be that left-handed bat? I still don't think it's on the roster. And I think for the last couple of years, since Dana Brown has taken over, they've always said, we want a left-handed outfielder, since Michael Brantley's been gone. And I just don't think the Astros have that guy yet. And if this team is going to make a postseason run, that's probably still going to be a position that they're going to look at, when it comes to the trade deadline. You traded away your one left-handed hitting outfielder at the deadline. Of course, you got 3 guys back that are on your major league roster today on the opening day roster. They come at a premium. I know that they cost a lot, left-handed hitting outfielders. And I think a couple of years ago, like Conforto was a name that kept coming to mind. But I think that's something that's just going to kind of be the big picture when it comes down to matchups and, who can they rely on when they really need a left-handed strike.
He's at the Vandalorian on X. The website and podcast are Astros Future. You got a ton more going on besides all that. What can we plug for you, Kenny?
I mean, if there's any overlap with Mizzou people, give me a holler. I do stuff for Rivals and Yahoo Sports covering Mizzou recruiting. So if there's any overlap, besides you, Rob, of course, fellow Mizzou alum, that would be nice. But I'll try to get a little bit more out there on the Astros too.
Yeah, me and Ben Dubose would be the overlap, and that's about it. Thanks for doing this, especially right after game 1. Just can't wait to see these guys play some more, and the Cam Smith era starting. And like I said on X, it's I'm debating right now if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, if he's got to wait till the second ballot to get into the Hall of Fame. But it's kind of it's fun again actually to watch Kenny, because you feel like that, and not everybody feels like the Astros are going to do it this time. Maybe they don't have the, so now there's like some skepticism with the Astros. And then, you have the Cam Smith and the Altuve thing that all mixes everything up, makes it interesting.
I grew up in an era of Astros baseball, of continued losing, watching this team with new faces every year, new third baseman, new first baseman, the Chris Carter era, Matt Dominguez, all these different names that I could throw out there, Brett Wallace. It's weird to see, a shift this year when you do see a lot more faces, but it isn't like those past years where, you see the new faces because nothing was working. It's almost like a facelift. The Astros lost guys in Alex Bregman. They traded away Kyle Tucker, but at the same time, they're still trying to compete right now. And it is definitely still an exciting time. And, you're riding the highs of an opening day victory for the Astros, but at the same time, you still saw a lot of positives, especially offensively and defensively.
Yeah, I guess you would call Cam Smith the Botox of the Astros. He brings that younger look. We injected at the Astros with the young look. Thanks again, Kenny, for doing this, and MIZ, baby.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.